it's Mrs. Lamondo, and I am back with the Unteachables. We left off on chapter 9, and this chapter is told from Parker's perspective. Back when Grandpa was alive, he and Grams ran the lunch counter at the bus station. I can still picture the luncheonette sign, which always looked like elect the noun to me. I don't remember much about Grandpa, except that he used to tell me that it was a $10 word, and I'd be able to read it just fine when I got older. You know how that worked out. Grams would stand me up in front of the candy counter, which seems like it was a mile high, although that was just because I was small. She'd say, "What'll it be, kiddo?" and I could pick out whatever I wanted. In those days, I didn't mind being kiddo because she definitely knew my real name. "This handsome fellow is my grandson Parker," she'd announce whenever the regulars came by. You could just tell by the way she boomed it out that she was totally thrilled by the idea. I wonder if she knows that the guy who drives her every morning is the same little kid she used to brag about to her customers. It's not her fault. When Grandpa died, she started forgetting a lot of stuff. But you'd think a grandson could be an exception to that, especially a grandson who's supposed to be her favorite person in the whole world. Grams insists that the reason she can't get her act together is she isn't a morning person. This is from a lady who gets up at 4 a.m. So we'll be halfway to the senior center before I look down and notice her shoes don't match, or that instead of her purse, she brought a half loaf of Wonder Bread. There are those red, yellow, and blue polka dots smiling down at me along with the name, which looks like Downer. Today, Mom's driving because Grams has her semi-annual conference with a social worker at the senior center. Mom calls it Meet the Teacher, since I guess it's a lot like a parent-teacher conference at school. Speaking of which, she says to me, "How's 8th grade going? I understand you're in a different kind of program this year." I almost reply, "Yeah, the Unteachables," but that wouldn't be a good idea. The minute she got through with Grams' Meet the Teacher, she'd be stalking the middle school looking to meet my teacher. I picture my folks trying to hold a conversation with Ribbit, who never glances up from his crossword puzzle. Dad especially would have no patience for that. Fall is our busiest season on the farm, with so much harvesting still to do. So I tell her it's going fine, like always. She casts a doubtful look. Like always might not have been the best choice of words. Mom signs my report card. She knows better than anyone what like always means. I add, our teacher has a lot of experience. He started out teaching stegosauruses and pterodactyls before moving to the Unteachables. Dinosaurs had no problem being in class with a guy who did crossword puzzles all day. Mom looks like she has more questions, but luckily Grams is waiting outside our building. No mismatched clothes or missing socks, no rubber gasket from the coffee maker on her wrist instead of her medical alert bracelet. She's thrown a little to see me in the passenger seat instead of behind the wheel, so it takes some coaxing to get her into the truck. She has to sit in the hump between Mom and me since the pickup has no back seat. "Of all the cars, you picked this one?" she asked Mom. "You're crazy." "It's just for a couple of minutes," my mother promises. "Once we drop Parker off at school, you'll have plenty of room." "I'm Parker," I put in quickly, since Grams is looking around the car in confusion. She beams at me. "Hiya, kiddo. Want breakfast?" "No time. We're coming to my stop." Mom pulls up in front of the school and I get out. She waves. "Have fun." Yeah, right. Fun. That's the last word that comes to mind when I think of SCS8. On the other hand, a sit down with Grams and a social worker wouldn't be a party either. I'm probably getting the better deal. As the pickup roars off, I hear a crunching sound. A crushed Velvezuela lays on the pavement, the plastic busted by the weight of the truck. It seems like there are more of them around every day as we get closer to Spirit Week, and those are just the leftovers from last year. The word is that Principal Vargas just placed a giant order for new ones for 2019. They're going to be bright yellow, our school color, and say, "Go, go, Golden Eagles" on the side. It doesn't make much sense to me that you can get detention for chewing gum, but blasting away on a horn as loud as an air raid siren is considered school spirit. Instead of being late like most mornings, I've got the opposite problem. I'm early. The buses haven't started arriving yet. I wander down to room 117, but no one's there. The kids of SCS8 dribble in 10 seconds before the late bell, and at that, we're usually ahead of Mr. Kermit. The only signs of life are coming from room 115. Miss Fountain is in her classroom rearranging the Velcro smiley faces on her job board. There's already a Hershey Kiss sitting in the middle of each desk. You know what Mr. Kermit gives us every morning? Nothing, if you don't count dirty looks. She spots me standing there in the doorway. "Good morning, Parker. You're early today. Come have a kiss." I stare at her for a long time before I realize she's talking about candy. Thanks. The chocolate is sweet in my mouth. When you spend all your time in SCS8, you forget there's another way to live. My eyes find the lizard terrarium. "Hey, Vladimir's back." She beams. "Mr. Kermit found him for me." "Really? That doesn't sound like Mr. Ribbit. The one I know wouldn't give anybody the skin off a grape." Suddenly, I experience the most irresistible desire to drop to the floor and sit cross-legged on the tape circle. I know Miss Fountain's teaching style is too babyish for our age, but circle time that day might have been the most comfortable I felt in middle school. When you're in that circle, nobody's going to ask you to read something that's written in unbreakable code. Maybe Aldo can't come up with anything nice to say, but I'm willing to go with it. Even if it means no reading, I'll say nice things about Elaine. A couple of the 7th graders show up, and there's an emotional reunion with Vladimir. I join in for a while, but eventually one of them notices I'm there. You're not in this class, he comments meaningfully. That's right, I reflect with a sigh, I'm not. I shoulder my backpack and head next door, even though it's still early. Kiana crouches in the hall outside SCS 8, a look of intense concentration on her face. What's going on, I ask. Shh. She presses a finger to her lips and points inside the classroom. Mr. Kermit is talking. At first I think he's chewing someone out. His voice is a lot sharper than his usual half-sleepy drone. Then I hear the reply, tiny and very close. It's coming from the intercom right on the other side of the door. Principal Vargas. I think you'd be happy about this, Zachary, the principal is saying. It's no secret the sound of those Vuvuzelas drives you over the edge. Zachary? Mr. Kermit's name is Zachary. That's not the point, our teacher replies. You've already separated my class from everyone else in the building. Maybe you have reasons for that, but you can't exclude them from activities for Spirit Week. That's punishing them for something they haven't done yet. You loathe Spirit Week, Mrs. Vargas accuses. We're not talking about me, we're talking about my students. As happy as I'd be to ignore the whole thing, I'm their only teacher. Who's going to stick up for them if I don't? Beside me, Kiana pumps her fist and whispers, go Ribbit. Think of who we're talking about here, the principal insists. Think of the disruption they're capable of. Now picture them with Vuvuzelas in their hand. Let that be my problem, Mr. Kermit says stubbornly. It's not going to be anybody's problem, Mrs. Vargas insists. It's a done deal, Zachary. Your kids are out. We hear a click as the office breaks the connection. On the other side of the door, Mr. Kermit mutters something I can't make out. Did you hear that, Kiana breathes? Mr. Kermit cares about us. I didn't hear anything about caring, I retort. That was all about Vuvuzelas, which we're not getting anyway. Aren't you paying attention? He fought for us. I can't figure him out, I complain. He hates Vuvuzelas. Why would he want us to have them? So he can kill whoever blows one? She throws up her hands in exasperation. Don't you see? It's not about the noisemakers. It's about fairness. That doesn't make sense to me. If life were fair, there would be no such thing as the Unteachables in the first place. Chapter 10, back to Kiana's point of view. Bad news from Utah. The equipment trailer got struck by lightning, so production of my mom's movie has to be shut down for a couple weeks. Can I come back home while you guys are waiting to start up again? I ask Mom over Skype. Wouldn't work, she tells me. What about school? How can we pull you out of Greenwich when you just started, and then you re-enroll when shooting resumes? That's too disruptive. I have to hold myself back from screaming, there's nothing to disrupt. I don't go here. Geez, Louise never registered me. I'm not even in a real class. Forget it. Mom would be on the phone to Dad in seconds flat. Never a pleasant combo. I'd be back in that office fast enough to make my head spin, registering for 8 classes instead of 1. 8 new teachers to get used to who give real assignments and homework. Nope. My life here isn't perfect, but it's designed for maximum bearableness. Why get complicated? I'm a short timer, just not quite as short as I thought. 2 extra weeks in Greenwich of Dad and Step Monster, of Chauncey sniffles and fevers and rashes and barfs. 2 more weeks in the Parmesan house. 2 more weeks at the Unteachables. Fine, I can handle it. I can do 2 more weeks standing on my head. Speaking of school, Mom goes on, how are you fitting in? I went there, back when it was the old Greenwich High. Great, I tell her, I've already gotten picked for this special program. My mom being special, I knew she wouldn't be able to resist the idea of me being exceptional. I plow forward. It's called SCS 8. Really hard to get into. I should know. I'm not even really in it. The teacher is fantastic. He's super hands-off because he wants us to work independently. Mr. Kermit believes... Kermit? She interrupts. You mean the man from the cheating scandal? Cheating scandal? Mom's brow furrows. It was an awfully long time ago, the early 90s. I remember I was away at college when it happened, but it must be the same person. Kermit isn't a very common name. I'm intrigued. What did he do? I don't know the details, but the whole town was up in arms about it. I'm surprised he's teaching. It was a horrible black mark against him. Wow, Mr. Kermit has a past. The plot thickens. Mom adds, do you want me to call the school and get to the bottom of it? No, I blurt. I mean, Mr. Kermit's an awesome teacher now. That's the main thing, right? Who cares what happened in the 90s? But Kiana, it was a cheating scandal. I don't want you mixed up in something like that. Relax, Mom. I guarantee there isn't any cheating going on at SCS 8. I can say that with total confidence because there isn't anything going on, period. Why would we bother to cheat when Mr. Kermit never even looks at the few papers he gets? Eventually, she agrees to let the subject drop. I end the Skype call, my mind racing. Suddenly, I've cracked a mystery that's been nagging at me for the very first moment since I followed Parker's schedule into room 117. Why would Mr. Kermit want to teach the Unteachables? Answer, he doesn't. He gets a bad class every year because of what happened in the 90s. Seems like Seems crazy that he's still paying for a mistake from so long ago. But if Mom remembers, other people do too. Turns out SES 8 isn't a dumping ground for rejects of the school. The reject teachers wind up there too. So Mr. Kermit is famous. If Mom still remembers what he did way back when, that counts as fame. Okay, it was bad timing. It was a bad thing, but so what? On reality TV shows, the biggest stars are always jerks. Besides cheating, I can't forget how he spoke up for our class to Mrs. Vargas, and how he fought for Barnstorm's right to stay with the football team. He may not be much of a teacher, but I'm convinced that he's a good guy. I'm almost anxious to get to school the next day, and it isn't just because Chauncey is barking the house down with a whooping cough. When I get to room 117, though, Mr. Kermit is absent. We have as a substitute, Mrs. Landsman. Mr. Kermit's not exactly a young guy, but Mrs. Landsman is really old. Rain does a quick sketch of her, rising from the grave as part of a zombie apocalypse. The kid is really talented. The picture makes the rounds of the class by paper airplane. Dawn of the Dead, hisses Mateo when the portrait lands on his desk. No talking, Mrs. Landsman orders. Too late, nickname is born. She's Dawn of the Dead, Dawn for short. She's grouchy, but we should be used to that by now, our regular teacher being a gold medalist in the Grouch Olympics. It feels different though. Dawn crabs at us while Mr. Kermit just crabs because crabbing is his natural state. So when some of it lands on us, we don't take it personally. We just happen to be in the same room. Dawn is yammering on about the Battle of Gettysburg when I hear a power hum, low but growing in volume. At first, I'm afraid the school's about to blow up, and then I realize the sound is coming from the desk next to me. Aldo. His face is almost as red as his hair as he devotes all his breath to maintaining the sound. Now the hum is coming from behind me at a slightly different pitch. I risk a glance over my shoulder. Barnstorm's doing it too. A look of unholy glee on his face. Next, the noise drops at least an octave. Elaine, buzzing like a bassoon. Well, we Californians know how to prank a sub as well as anybody, so I jump right in. Pretty soon, SCS-8 is vibrating. Alarmed, Dawn of the Dead puts in a call to the custodian. As soon as Mr. Carstairs comes in, we stop humming. It was happening a second ago. It sounded like a problem with the wiring, the teacher insists. The custodian rakes us with a rueful look. It's the kids, ma'am. They're messing with you. They do it all the time to subs. Dawn doesn't like that. For a minute, I'm afraid we're going to have a real zombie apocalypse on our hands, but in the end, what can she do besides yell? She does a whole lot of that. It's pretty jarring when you're used to Mr. Kermit, who barely speaks at all. We fight back. We do the old drop a textbook trick at least 20 times. Barnstorm drums with his crutches on the floor. Elaine pretends to be asleep, which is odd because Raim stays awake and alert. Mateo speaks to the substitute in Dothraki and does his written work in Elven runes. That's right, I said work. Dawn of the Dead is trying to get us to work. What does she think this is? Take out your math book, she announces. What math books? Barnstorm returns. Surely there are math books. How do you study math? We do worksheets, Mateo supplies. What worksheets? I don't see any worksheets. There should be lesson plans. Of course, there should if we had a normal teacher. But Dawn of the Dead doesn't know Mr. Kermit. Maybe she thinks we ransacked the classroom before she arrived and threw out all the notes on what she was supposed to run for the day. Whatever the reason, she's getting madder and madder. With no lesson plans to go by, Dawn finds a language arts paragraph in some random book. But then she chooses Parker to read it aloud. So obviously he takes forever to sound out the first word, and because we've been giving her a hard time all day, she picks now to decide that someone's yanking her chain when Parker's the only one who isn't. So she sends him to the principal's office. 60 seconds later, we hear a pickup truck with a broken muffler start up and peel out of the parking lot. You know he didn't do that on purpose, I tell Dawn. He has a reading problem and he's sensitive about it. Miss Fountain comes over and tries to calm everyone down by inviting us for circle time. Circle time? Dawn is outraged. These students are too old for circle time. So are yours. Miss Fountain seems to be about to launch on into a speech about how no one is too old for positive reinforcement. But then she takes a good look at Dawn of the Dead, who might actually be. She beats a hasty retreat to her own class. When the bell finally rings at 3:30, Dawn of the Dead tells us we're the most disrespectful class she's ever met in her long teaching career, and we should be ashamed of ourselves. My son went to this school. He's a successful journalist today, and he'd be appalled to see what's become of the place that gave him his education. You students are a new low. I don't think you'd ever behave for Mr. Kermit the way you behaved today. As we listen to her sensible ears clicking down the hall, a strange quiet descends room 117. Yeah, well, maybe Mr. Kermit isn't a cranky old bag like you. Aldo tosses her when she's too far to hear it. Thing is, she's right. We wouldn't behave that way for Ribbit. I wonder why, Rain muses. I could have answered that because even though Mr. Kermit ignores us, he knows we're his class and he sticks up for us when we need it. He likes us in his way. And I'd never be able to explain that to the others, but I think in our way we might like him too. When Mr. Kermit enters room 117 the next morning, he's greeted by a sight he's never seen before. The seven of us, quiet and attentive, seated at our desks, hands folded, eyes front. Let's face it, there's no way Dawn of the Dead said anything good about yesterday. This then is payback time, and none of us are looking forward to it. You can feel the tension in the air as we wait for our teacher to let us have it. Mr. Kermit sets his newspaper and coffee down. What? Nobody answers. So he starts handing out the first worksheet of the day. The instant the papers hit our desk, there's a pen in every hand and our heads are down. Out of the corner of my eye, I see the teacher pull up short, frowning. This is another first. The entire class hard at work, no airplanes circling overhead, no talking. He shrugs and returns to his desk, peering down at the crossword puzzle. I turn my attention to the assignment, which is about current events. I think hard about what I've seen lately in the news or on the internet and social media. The intercom buzzes to life. Mr. Kermit, Principal Vargas is available this morning if you'd like to discuss Miss Landsman's report on your students from yesterday. You could almost hear the jarring sound of a needle scratching the vinyl record. We all freeze, staring at our teacher. If Donna the Dead filed a report, you can bet she gave us a Z-. No, Mr. Kermit replies, thanks. That gets our attention. Is Mr. Kermit so detached from reality he doesn't think that anything bad happened yesterday? Or is it that he never read Dawn's report, like he never reads any of our work? The mood in room 117 lightens a little. Whatever the reason, it looks as if we might be off the hook. It occurs to me that maybe Mr. Kermit never reads our stuff because none of the Unteachables ever had handed anything worth reading. That's an easy fix. There's an essay question on the back of today's worksheet, and I make up my mind to knock it out of the park. The prompt is about mass transit, subways, buses, light rail trains. I believe in that kind of thing anyway. I'm from LA, where our transit system is a joke. What do I get for it? Traffic jams and pollution. Pretty soon the entire page is full and I'm only getting started. I approach Mr. Kermit's desk. Ribbit has pushed his puzzle aside. He's examining a memo from the office. I catch the heading, Report of Substitute Teacher, across the top. He notices me and I search his eyes for a reaction for what has to be a horrible rundown of the day. Are you mad at us? I ask in a small voice. He looks like the question never occurred to him. There are two sides to every story, he says finally. He reaches down and slides the report into the trash can. Is there something I can do for you? He adds. Well, obviously wishing I would go away. Can I have more paper? His brow furrows. For what? My essay? I ran out of space? That causes a kind of stir in our class. In SCS 8, kids do little work, never too much. Mr. Kermit's back into his puzzle now. It's almost as if he's hoping I'll forget what I asked for and leave him alone. So can I have it? I persist. He looks blank. The paper? Yes, fine. Where is it? He gets it from his desk and surveys the room, and it's like he suddenly found himself in some strange and exotic location, a place he's never seen before. He leads me to a storage closet and opens the door, empty except for cobwebs. He turns to me, completely helpless. Maybe Miss Fountain has extra paper, I suggest. I'm on it. Parker bolts for the door so suddenly that he knocks over his desk and goes flying. He face plants on the floor, springs back up, and disappears into the hall. The next thing we hear is Miss Fountain's voice from the next room. Parker, you're bleeding. Has he got a driver's license? Barnstorm sneers. That kid can barely walk. Parker's back in a few minutes, holding a wad of pink-stained paper towels to his bloody nose. He hands me a sheaf of lined paper, also pink-stained. I fill 4 pages before I'm done with the essay, and I'm pretty satisfied with it. I know I'm just a short timer, but I can't let my work habits go totally down the drain while I'm here. I'm going to have to be ready to hit the ground running when I go back to school in California. I march up to the front and hand my paper to Mr. Kermit. He looks at me like I've just presented him with a plate of baby scorpions. It's my essay, I reply, to the question he probably won't ask. I can't wait to hear what you think. He accepts the papers, places them on the corner of his desk, and goes to his crossword. Aren't you going to read it, I press? Of course, he assures me without looking up. 3 days later, the pages still sit on the corner of the desk untouched. Parker's blood spots are turning brown. When we return next time, we will hear Chapter 11, which is from Barnstorm's point of view. See you then.